Losing my mother was already unbearable pain. But nothing prepared me for what I would discover at her funeral. A secret capable of changing my entire life. And that's how I turned the tables. My name is Rachel Thompson, I'm 34 years old, and I'm a nurse here in Denver, Colorado. For my entire life, I thought I knew my mother, Mary. I thought she was just a strong woman who raised me alone after my father died. But on the day I laid her to rest forever, I discovered that our entire life was built on a lie. And when I say lie, I'm not talking about a little white lie to spare me. I'm talking about a secret so deep, so devastating, that it completely changed who I thought I was. If you think you know your family, that you know the people closest to you, ... Prepare to question everything after this story. Because sometimes, the people we love most are also the ones who deceive us the most. Welcome to Revenge Cat. We reveal gripping stories of broken trust, family secrets, and shocking twists. If you crave powerful narratives, intense emotions, and the sweet taste of justice, ... This is your place. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing. I grew up believing I was the daughter of a dead hero. At least, that's what my mother always told me. Your father was an incredible man, Rachel, she used to say, her eyes glistening with tears. He died when you were just a baby. A terrible car accident. But he loved you more than anything in the world. For 34 years of my life, I carried this story like a weight in my chest. I imagined what it would have been like to have had a father. How different our life would be if he were alive. My mother worked as a cleaner at 3 different jobs just to support me. We lived in a small house in the Denver suburbs, where every penny mattered. I would see her coming home exhausted, her knees purple from scrubbing floors so much, her hands dried out from cleaning products. And whenever I asked about my father, she would look away. One day you'll understand, my daughter. One day, when you're older. But that day never came. Whenever I insisted, she would change the subject or start crying. Over time, I stopped asking. I thought I was protecting her from the pain of remembering the loss. At school, when other kids talked about their fathers, I would create stories in my head. I imagined that my father was brave, that he would have been proud of me, that he would have taught me to ride a bike, that he would have taken me fishing, that he would have scared my boyfriends during adolescence. I grew up with this emptiness, but also with deep admiration for my mother. She was my heroine. The woman who sacrificed everything for me, who never remarried because, according to her, she could never love another man the way she loved my father. When I graduated from nursing school, she cried with pride. Your father would be so proud, she whispered in my ear that day. You made it, my daughter. You made it. But looking back now, I realize there were signs. Signs I should have noticed, but chose to ignore because I blindly trusted my mother. There were never any photos of him around the house. We lost everything in the fire when you were little, she explained. But what fire? I didn't remember any fire. She never talked about in-laws, brothers-in-law, his family. They distanced themselves after the death, she would say. Some people don't know how to deal with pain. There was no death certificate. There were no documents. There was nothing concrete about this man who supposedly had fathered me and then died tragically. And there was something else. Sometimes, when we were out on the street, my mother would get tense for no apparent reason. She would look over her shoulder, hurry our steps. Once, when I was about 10 years old, we were at the supermarket and she grabbed me by the arm, hiding behind a shelf. What's wrong, Mom? Nothing, dear. I thought I saw someone I knew. But her face was pale. Her hands were shaking. It wasn't the behavior of someone who had seen an acquaintance. It was the behavior of someone who had seen a ghost. For years, these episodes happened sporadically. My mother would get paranoid, change our routine, avoid certain places. I thought it was just anxiety, work stress. I never imagined she was running from someone. Running from someone who was supposed to be dead. This past March, my mother was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, terminal stage. As a nurse, I knew what that meant. We had, at most, a few months together. Those were the most difficult months of my life. Watching that strong woman, who had always been my safe harbor, waste away before my eyes was daily torture. I took care of her as best I could, balancing my work at the hospital with home care. In the last days, she was delirious a lot because of the morphine. Sometimes, she would say strange things. Names I had never heard. Places we didn't know. Once, she grabbed my hand and whispered, "Rachel, forgive me. Forgive me for everything." "Forgive what, Mom? You never did anything wrong." But she had already returned to an unconscious state. On August 15th, she died. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath. And even with all the pain, I felt that at least she had departed in peace, surrounded by love. Little did I know that the real storm was just beginning. The funeral was scheduled for August 17th, at a small funeral home here in Denver. I expected it to be a simple and intimate ceremony. My mother didn't have many close friends, and our family had always been small. Some neighbors came, her work colleagues, some of my friends from the hospital. Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, came from Boulder. She was the only close relative we had. I was receiving condolences. When I felt a chill down my spine, someone was watching me. I turned around and saw a man in his mid-50s, graying hair, very familiar, blue eyes. He was standing at the back of the room, just staring at me. I didn't know him, but there was something about him that deeply bothered me. Something familiar that I couldn't identify. I tried to focus on the people who came to greet me, but my eyes always returned to that strange man. He didn't approach the coffin. He didn't come to talk to me. He just stood there, watching. That's when Aunt Margaret appeared beside me. She was also looking at the man, and her face was tense, worried. "Aunt Margaret, who is that man?" She hesitated. She looked at me, then at him, then at the floor. "Rachel, dear, I think we need to talk." That's when I felt the ground disappear from under my feet. "About what?" "About that man. About your mother. About many things you need to know." My mother could no longer answer me. But her silence was screaming. Aunt Margaret took me to a private room in the funeral home. Her hands were shaking as she closed the door. "Rachel, sit down, please, Aunt, you're scaring me." "Who is that man?" She took a deep breath, as if she were preparing to tell me the most difficult secret of her life. "That man, Rachel, that man is your father." The world stopped. Literally stopped. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "That's impossible. My father died when I was a baby." "No, dear, he didn't die. Your mother lied to you your whole life." Her words echoed in my head like a scream in an empty tunnel. Lied. Her whole life. My father was alive. This can't be true. "It's true, Rachel. And there's much more you need to know." She told me everything. The real story. The story that my mother hid from me for 34 years. My parents met when she was 18 years old. His name was David Richardson, and he was a few years older. They had an intense relationship, got married quickly, and soon I was on the way. But David never wanted to be a father. When I was born, he became increasingly distant. He started going out with other women. He would come home drunk, yell at my mother, say that I had ruined his life. When I was only 6 months old, he simply disappeared. He left a letter saying he had found someone else and didn't want to know about our family anymore. He left no address. He left no phone number. He simply vanished from our lives. Your mother was devastated, continued Aunt Margaret. She loved you so much, Rachel. And she was afraid that, one day, you would feel rejected knowing that your father abandoned you. So she invented the story of the car accident. I couldn't process it. 34 years of lies. 34 years believing I was the daughter of a man who loved me, when in reality I was the daughter of a man who rejected me before even getting to know me. And why is he here now? Why did he show up at the funeral? Aunt Margaret lowered her eyes. Because your mother died without a will, Rachel, and by law, he has rights to the inheritance. That's when everything clicked in my head. His calculating look. The way he watched me. He wasn't there out of grief. He wasn't there out of missing my mother. He was there for the money. I returned to the main hall in a state of shock. I looked at my mother's coffin and, for the first time, I felt angry at her. A deep, devastating anger. How could she lie to me my whole life? How could she let me believe in a fantasy while the truth was so cruel? All the nights I dreamed of a hero, father. All the times I wished he were alive to see me grow up. All the times I felt sorry for my mother for having lost the love of her life. All lies. All a big act. And the worst part, now that the truth had come to light, that man who abandoned me wanted a part of what my mother had built alone. He wanted to profit from the death of the woman he destroyed and left behind. I looked at him again. David Richardson, my biological father, the man who should have protected me, but who rejected me before even getting to know me. He noticed I was looking and approached. Rachel. His voice was different from what I had imagined all these years. It didn't have the caring and protective tone I had fantasized about. It was cold, calculating. I'm sorry for the loss of your mother, not for our loss, for my loss. As if he had no connection to her. As if he were just a stranger offering condolences. Thank you, I managed to respond. I think we need to talk. About practical matters. Practical matters. He didn't even disguise it. He didn't even try to pretend he was there out of longing or remorse. It was purely about money. We have nothing to talk about, Rachel. I know this must be difficult for you. But I'm your father. And by law, I have rights. Rights. That word hit me like a bullet. You gave up your rights when you abandoned me. When you abandoned my mother. I was young. I made mistakes. But now I'm here. Now that she's dead and left something of value, you're here. He sighed, as if I were a stubborn child who didn't understand the situation. Let's resolve this civilly, Rachel. It doesn't have to be complicated. That's when something changed inside me. A strength I didn't know I had rose from the depths of my soul. They thought I would stay quiet. But they didn't know the new version of me. In the days following the funeral, I dove into an obsessive investigation about David Richardson. If he wanted to play legal games, I was going to play too. But I was going to play to win. I used my contacts from the hospital, lawyer friends, even a private investigator that a colleague recommended. I wanted to know everything about this man who dared to appear in my life when it suited him. What I discovered made me even angrier. David Richardson wasn't just an absent father. He was a professional con artist. In the last 30 years, he had married and abandoned at least 4 other women, always following the same pattern. He would seduce vulnerable women, often with small children, marry quickly, and then disappear, taking whatever of value he could get. He had an extensive criminal record: fraud, family abandonment, even domestic violence. He was a parasite who lived by sucking the life out of people and then moving on to the next victim. And now, at 58 years old, he was trying to do the same thing to me. Trying to profit from the death of the woman he had abandoned decades ago. But there was a detail he didn't know. A detail that would change everything. During my investigation, I discovered that my mother had been smarter than I imagined. She never made the divorce official, but she had filed a complaint for family abandonment in court in 1990, and more importantly, she had documented all attempts to contact him over the years, so he would pay child support, attempts that he completely ignored. By Colorado law, a father who abandons his family and never contributes financially to raising the child automatically loses inheritance rights after 18 years of complete absence. David Richardson had no idea, but legally, he had no right to absolutely nothing. With all this information in hand, I sought out Sarah Martinez, a lawyer specializing in family law whom I had met during a case at the hospital. I explained the entire situation to her. Rachel, you have a solid case, she told me after analyzing all the documents. This man has no legal right to the inheritance. Furthermore, considering his history, we can even sue him for attempted fraud. I don't just want to protect my inheritance, Sarah. I want him to pay for all the years my mother suffered, for all the nights she worked alone to support me, for all the tears she shed for a man who wasn't worth the air he breathed. I understand your anger, Rachel, and we're going to channel that anger productively. We scheduled a meeting with David Richardson and the cheap lawyer he had hired. The meeting would be at Sarah's office on a Thursday afternoon. Throughout that week, I felt anxiety mixed with excitement. Finally, I was going to be able to confront the man who destroyed my family. Finally, I was going to be able to defend my mother the way she deserved. The night before the meeting, I went to the cemetery where she was buried. I placed fresh flowers on the grave and talked to her. Mom, I understand why you lied. I understand that you wanted to protect me from the pain of rejection. But now I need to fight for both of us. I need to show this man that we are no longer the same vulnerable women he left behind. The wind blew strong at that moment, swaying the trees around. I chose to believe it was her giving me strength for what was to come. The meeting took place at 2 in the afternoon. David arrived punctually, accompanied by a lawyer who looked like he had come out of a B movie. Cheap suits, synthetic leather briefcase, the exaggerated confidence of someone who thinks they're dealing with a naive person. I was accompanied by Sarah, and we had prepared a folder with all the evidence we had collected. Well, let's get straight to the point, began David's lawyer. My client is the biological father of Ms. Thompson, and therefore, has the right to 50% of the inheritance left by Mary Thompson. Sarah smiled. A smile I had seen before when she was about to destroy the opposing side's argument. Interesting. And what do you base this claim on? On Rachel's birth certificate, obviously. David Richardson is listed as the father. Correct, he is listed as the biological father. But you forgot some important details. Sarah opened our folder and began spreading documents on the table. First, David Richardson abandoned the family when Rachel was 6 months old. Second, he never paid a cent of child support. Third, he never tried to contact his daughter in 34 years. His lawyer began to look uncomfortable. Fourth, Sarah continued, Mary Thompson filed a complaint for family abandonment in 1990, which was never contested. And fifth, most importantly, by Colorado law, parents who completely abandon their children for more than 18 years automatically lose inheritance rights. David finally spoke. I was young. I wasn't ready to be a father. That doesn't mean I don't have rights now. That's when I felt the anger explode inside me. Rights? You want to talk about rights? I stood up from my chair, looking directly into his eyes. Where were your rights when my mother worked 3 jobs to support me? Where were your rights when I was sick and she spent entire nights taking care of me alone? Where were your rights on my birthdays, graduations, the most important moments of my life? David lowered his gaze, but I wasn't finished. Do you know what my mother did on Father's Day at school? She went and pretended to be both father and mother, so I would feel different from the other children. Do you know how many times she cried at night, thinking she wasn't enough for me? Rachel, no. You don't have the right to say my name. You lost that right 34 years ago when you decided we were a burden in your life. Sarah put her hand on my shoulder, calming me, and continued the presentation. And there's one more thing, David. During our investigation, we discovered your history. For marriages, for abandonments, multiple accusations of fraud. Do you really think you're going to fool anyone else? David's lawyer was visibly nervous now. That's irrelevant to the current case. Actually, it's extremely relevant. Because it shows us a pattern of behavior. David Richardson isn't just an absent father. He is a professional con artist who is now trying to profit from the death of the woman he abandoned. Sarah stood up and went to the window. Here's our proposal. David Richardson signs a document renouncing any right to Mary Thompson's inheritance. In exchange, we do unsue him for attempted fraud and do undisclose his history to his possible future victims. David and his lawyer whispered to each other for a few minutes. And if we refuse? Sarah smiled again. Then we'll see you in court. And I can guarantee it won't be a pleasant experience for you. David Richardson knew he was cornered. 20 minutes later, he signed all documents renouncing any right to my mother's inheritance. But I wasn't satisfied yet. "There's one last thing," I said when he was about to leave. "What?" "I want you to look at me and admit it. Admit that you were a coward. Admit that you destroyed a family because you were too selfish to take responsibility." David stared at me for a long moment. You could see he wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible, but something in my tone made him stop. "Rachel, I say it. I was a coward. I destroyed a family because I didn't have the courage to be man enough to take responsibility, and your mother was a much better woman than I deserved. You both were much better than I deserved." It was the first honest thing he had said since appearing in my life. "Now get out of here. And if I find out you tried to contact any member of my family or friends, I will make your life hell." He left without looking back. In the weeks that followed, I went through a completely different grieving process. I was no longer just mourning my mother's death. I was also processing 34 years of lies and rebuilding my identity. I was angry at her for a while. Really angry. How could she lie to me my whole life? How could she let me fantasize about a hero father when reality was so different? But gradually, I began to understand. My mother was an 18-year-old girl when she found herself abandoned with a baby in her arms. She had no experience, no close family to help, no resources. And even so, she decided to raise me alone. She invented the story of the dead father, because in her mind, it was better for me to believe I was the daughter of someone who loved me than to know I was the daughter of someone who rejected me. It was a lie born from love. A lie to protect me. And in a way, it worked. I grew up with self-esteem, became a confident and capable person. Maybe if I had known the truth since childhood, I would have developed rejection complexes that would have followed me forever. My mother did what she thought was best with the emotional tools she had at the time. Today, 3 months after the funeral, I can look at this entire situation with more clarity. I discovered that I'm not defined by my biological father's mistakes. I'm not defined by my mother's lies. I'm defined by my own choices, by the woman I became despite all circumstances. David Richardson did me a favor without knowing it. When he abandoned me, he gave me the opportunity to be raised by an extraordinary woman who taught me values he could never have taught. Values like determination, compassion, honesty, and, mainly, the ability to fight for those we love. In my work as a nurse, I see families destroying themselves over money every day. I see children fighting over inheritances while parents are still in hospital beds. I see how much greed can transform people into monsters. But I also see the opposite. I see daughters caring for sick parents with unconditional love. I see families coming together in the most difficult moments. I see that true love always wins in the end. My mother left me much more than money or material goods. She left me an example of strength, sacrifice, unconditional love. And that's an inheritance that no David Richardson in this world can touch. My mother was wrong to hide the truth from me for so long. But I know she tried to protect me from pain. What she didn't know is that, one day, I would have the strength to face any truth, no matter how painful. At her funeral, I cried for the loss of the most important woman in my life. But I was also reborn. Because that's where I discovered what I am capable of when someone tries to diminish me or deceive me. David Richardson appeared in my life thinking he would find a vulnerable orphan, easy to manipulate. He didn't count on the fact that 34 years of being raised by a warrior had transformed me into a warrior too. When he tried to profit from my mother's death, he found someone who wouldn't accept it quietly. When he tried to make me believe he had rights over our lives, he discovered that I had learned to fight for those I love. I turned the tables because I understood that I don't need to be a victim of circumstances. I don't need to accept that other people define my story or my worth. Today, when I pass by the house where I grew up, I see everything differently. I no longer see poverty or limitations. I see the place where an incredible woman taught me that family isn't about blood or genes. It's about who's present when you need them. It's about who makes sacrifices for you. It's about who loves you unconditionally. My mother was both father and mother at the same time. She was provider and caregiver. She was my biggest fan and my greatest teacher. And if she needed to invent a story to give me the paternal love that David Richardson denied me, then so be it. In the end, we all invent stories to survive. The difference is that some people invent stories to hurt, while others invent stories to protect. My mother chose to protect me. And I chose to honor that protection by fighting for our dignity. That's how I turned the tables. By not accepting being defined by abandonment. By not allowing someone to profit from our pain. And mainly, by discovering that I'm much stronger than I imagined. Because in the end, David Richardson may have given me life biologically. But who really raised me, who transformed me into the woman I am today, was Mary Thompson, my mother, my heroine. The woman who proved that sometimes a lie told out of love is worth more than 1,000 truths told out of convenience. And that's a lesson I'll carry forever. If you made it this far, I hope you take one thing from this story. Never let other people's failures define who you are. Never accept being diminished by people who weren't present in your journey. And mainly, always fight for those who truly love you, even when those people are no longer here to defend themselves. Because in the end, turning the tables is about this: choosing who you want to be, regardless of where you came from. And I chose to be Mary Thompson's daughter, forever. For more exciting videos, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like, comment, and share. If you want powerful narratives, strong emotions, and the sweet taste of justice, this is your place.